Sheikh Mikal was a man forged in fire and sand. His face, weathered by sun and wind, held the stern gaze of a hawk. He ruled his nomadic tribe with an iron hand, his word law beneath the vast, star-studded desert sky. But behind his hardened exterior lay a deep well of sorrow. Raiders had stolen his family years ago, leaving him with a heart as barren as the dunes. Marriage, once a cherished dream, now felt like a cruel mockery. He had vowed never to open himself to such pain again. The elders, however, saw things differently. A tribe needed a strong leader, yes, but also a family to secure its future. They constantly urged him to remarry, to choose a wife from among their daughters. Mikal would politely decline, his refusals as firm as the desert rocks. He poured his energy into his people, leading them from oasis to oasis, ensuring their safety and prosperity. Love and family were luxuries he could no longer afford. Today, Mikal rode at the head of his caravan, his black stallion a proud silhouette. Against the setting sun, they were approaching the bustling marketplace at the crossroads of the Silk Road. The air, thick with the scent of spices and the cries of merchants, crackled with energy. Mikal felt a familiar unease. Marketplaces were breeding grounds for thieves and troublemakers, the kind of chaos he despised. He tightened his grip on the reins, his eyes scanning the crowded streets. He would not tolerate any disruption to the peace he so carefully maintained. Gadira was a mountain of a woman. Her size, which had brought her so much misery, was also her strength. Sold into slavery because of her generous curves, she had endured endless taunts and cruelties. Yet her spirit remained unbroken. Beneath her imposing frame resided a heart full of kindness, a heart currently overflowing with worry for two small children. The twins, scrawny and wide-eyed, clung to her skirts, their small hands gripping her rough-spun tunic. They were her sister's children, entrusted to her care after her sister's untimely death. Gadira had sworn to protect them, even if it meant sacrificing everything. They lived a precarious existence, hiding in the shadows of the marketplace, scavenging for scraps and dodging the watchful eyes of the merchants. Gadira knew it was a dangerous life, but it was all she had left. She used her size to her advantage, her booming voice and imposing presence deterring most troublemakers. But today, trouble had found them. Merchant Qasim, a man with a serpent's smile and eyes like cold coins, had spotted the twins. He dealt in rare goods, spices and silks, but his most profitable trade was in children. He saw the twins as another commodity, easily sold to wealthy families or unscrupulous traders. His guards, burly men with cruel faces, surrounded Gadira and the children. "These brats are mine," Qasim sneered, his voice dripping with greed. "They were stealing from my stall." It was a lie, of course. The twins hadn't dared to go near his stall, their stomachs rumbling with hunger, but their fear even greater. Gadira spread her arms wide, shielding the twins with her body. "They are with me," she declared, her voice echoing through the marketplace. "Leave them be." The guards laughed, their mockery echoing off the stalls. One of them stepped forward, raising his hand to strike her. Gadira flinched, but she did not move. She would not let them take the children. The guard's hand came down, but before it could connect, a sharp command cut through the air. "Stop!" The voice, deep and resonant, commanded attention. The guards froze, their eyes darting toward the source of the command. Riding through the parting crowd, his black stallion prancing nervously amidst the chaos, came Sheikh Mikal. His eyes, like chips of flint, surveyed the scene. He saw the obese slave woman, her arms protectively around two trembling children, and the sneering merchant with his menacing guards. "What is the meaning of this?" Mikal demanded, his voice ringing with authority. Qasim bowed low, his smile faltering. "My lord, this woman stole these children. I was merely retrieving my property." Gadira's heart pounded. She knew that her word would carry little weight against a wealthy merchant. She braced herself for the inevitable, the twins' small hands tightening their grip on her tunic. Mikhail looked at Kadira, his gaze piercing. He saw not a thief, but a protector. He saw courage in her defiance, a strength that resonated with his own. He made a decision, swift and decisive. "They are under my protection now," he declared, his voice silencing the murmurs of the crowd. Kadira stared at him, stunned. The Sheikh, the fearsome leader of the desert tribe, had taken her side. The twins, sensing her relief, peeked out from behind her skirts, their wide eyes fixed on the imposing figure of the Sheikh. Kadira followed Mikhail's men, the twins clinging to her like shadows. They walked through the bustling marketplace, past stalls laden with spices, silks, and glittering jewels. The twins, mesmerized by the sights and sounds, momentarily forgot their fear. Kadira, however, remained wary. She had learned to trust no one, especially not men in positions of power. What would this sheikh do with them? Would he believe Qasim's lies? They left the marketplace behind and entered the sprawling tent city of Mikhail's tribe. The tents, woven from richly dyed fabrics, stood in neat rows beneath the vast desert sky. Children played amongst the camels and goats, their laughter echoing through the camp. Women tended to cooking fires, the aroma of roasted meat and sweet dates filling the air. It was a scene of vibrant life, a stark contrast to the shadows of the marketplace. Kadira was led to Mikhail's tent, the largest and most ornate in the camp. Inside, the air was cool and fragrant with incense. Rich carpets covered the floor, and cushions were piled high around a low table. Mikhail sat on a raised dais, his stern gaze fixed on her. The twins, intimidated by the grandeur, hid behind Kadira's skirts. "You will stay here for now," Mikhail said, his voice softer than she had expected. "You will be provided with food and shelter." Kadira bowed her head, unsure how to respond. She was grateful for the offer, but she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She had been given shelter before, only to have it cruelly snatched away. As she settled the twins onto a soft cushion, the tent flap opened and several elders entered. Their faces were etched with disapproval, their eyes fixed on Kadira. They whispered amongst themselves, their words sharp and pointed. Kadira understood enough of their language to know they were not happy with her presence. "My lord," one of the elders said, his voice laced with concern, "is it wise to bring such a person into our camp? And with children, no less. Orphans bring bad luck." Mikhail's jaw tightened. He knew the elders' prejudices. They valued strength and beauty, qualities they clearly did not see in Kadira. But he had seen something else in her, a fierce protectiveness that mirrored his own. "She saved those children from Qasim," Mikhail said, his voice firm. "She showed courage in the face of danger. That is something to be admired, not condemned." The elders exchanged uneasy glances, but they did not challenge him further. They knew Mikhail's temper, and they knew his word was law. They bowed and retreated, their whispers trailing behind them like wisps of smoke. Mikhail watched Kadira as she tended to the twins. She spoke to them softly, her large hands gentle as she wiped their faces and offered them dates. He saw the love in her eyes, the fierce devotion that had driven her to protect them. He had seen such love before, in his own family, a family now lost to him. He felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in years, a flicker of warmth in the desolate landscape of his heart. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert sky in hues of orange and purple. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of the camp softened. Kadira sat by a small fire outside Mikhail's tent, the twins nestled asleep beside her. A servant brought them a platter of roasted meat and flatbread, more food than they had seen in weeks. The twins, their hunger finally satisfied, drifted off to sleep, their faces peaceful and relaxed. Mikhail emerged from his tent, his tall figure casting a long shadow in the firelight. He gestured for Kadira to join him by the fire. She hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She still didn't know what he wanted from her. "Eat," he said, offering her a piece of bread. His voice was gentle, devoid of the harshness she had expected. Kadira took the bread, her fingers brushing against his. She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his for the first time. His gaze was intense, but not unkind. She saw the weariness etched on his face, the lines of sorrow around his eyes. He was a man burdened by responsibility, a man who had known great loss. They ate in silence, the crackling fire the only sound between them. Finally, Mikal spoke. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Where do you come from?" Kadira hesitated. Her story was one of hardship and betrayal, a story she rarely shared. But there was something in Mikal's eyes, a quiet understanding that encouraged her to speak. She told him about her family, about her sister's illness and death, about how she had cared for the twins until she was sold into slavery. She spoke of the endless hunger, the cruel taunts, the constant fear. She did not mention Qasim by name, fearing it would only fuel his anger. Mikal listened patiently, his gaze never leaving her face. He understood loss, understood the pain of having your family torn away. He saw in Kadira a strength that resonated with his own, a resilience, forged in the fires of adversity. "And the twins?" he asked gently. "They are my family now," Kadira said, her voice filled with emotion. "I will protect them no matter the cost." Mikal nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. He told her about his own family, about the raid that had taken them from him, about the vow he had made never to marry again. They sat in silence for a while, the shared weight of their grief hanging heavy in the air. Then Mikal looked at Kadira, a flicker of something new in his eyes. It wasn't pity, she realized, but something akin to respect, perhaps even admiration. It was a look that made her heart beat a little faster, a look that made her dare. A hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she and the twins had finally found a safe haven. The next morning, Kadira awoke to the sounds of the bustling camp. The twins, still nestled beside her, slept soundly. She rose carefully, careful not to disturb them, and stepped outside. The desert air was crisp and cool, the sun just beginning to peek over the horizon. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Perhaps this place, this Sheikh, could offer them the safety they so desperately needed. As she returned to the tent, a servant approached, carrying a bundle wrapped in fine silk. "The Sheikh sends this for you," the servant said, her voice respectful. Kadira unwrapped the bundle, her eyes widening in surprise. It was a beautiful robe, deep blue in color, embroidered with intricate gold thread. It was unlike anything she had ever owned, a garment fit for a queen. She slipped the robe over her simple tunic, the soft silk cool against her skin. She looked at herself in the polished metal mirror the servant held up, barely recognizing the woman staring back. She looked dignified. Later that day, as the sun beat down on the camp, Kadira sat with the twins in the shade of Mikal's tent. She sang them a lullaby, a soft melody from her homeland. The twins, lulled by her voice, closed their eyes and drifted off to sleep. Mikal entered the tent, his gaze softening as he saw Kadira with the children. He had been observing her from afar, watching the way she cared for them, the gentle tenderness in her touch. He had seen many women in his life, women of beauty and grace, but he had never seen anyone like Kadira. Her strength, her resilience, her unwavering devotion to the twins, it touched something deep within him. He sat down beside her, listening to the soft melody of her lullaby. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the emotion behind them, the love that poured from her heart. When the song ended, Kadira looked up at him, a shy smile gracing her lips. "It is a song my mother used to sing to me," she explained. Mikal nodded, his eyes filled with a warmth she had not seen before. He reached out and gently touched her hand, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. It was a gesture of trust, of acceptance, a gesture that made Qadira's heart soar with a fragile hope. Merchant Qasim was a man who understood the value of patience. He knew that rushing a delicate transaction could ruin everything. He also understood the power of whispers and the corrosive nature of doubt. He had lost the twins, a valuable commodity, but he was not a man to accept defeat easily. Qasim began to spread his poison throughout Mikal's camp. He spoke to the elders, his voice dripping with false concern. He claimed that Qadira was a dangerous woman, a thief who had snatched the children from the marketplace. He hinted that she planned to sell them to slavers, painting a grim picture of their fate. He played on their fears, their superstitions, about orphans and the bad luck they supposedly brought. The elders, already uneasy about Qadira's presence, began to listen. They had never trusted outsiders, and Qadira, with her imposing size and unfamiliar ways, was the epitome of an outsider. Qasim's words, like tiny seeds, took root in their minds, slowly poisoning their perception of her. He then sought an audience with Mikal. He entered the Sheikh's tent, his face a mask of injured innocence. "My lord," he began, his voice laced with feigned respect, "I have come to plead for the return of my property. That woman, Qadira, she stole those children from me. I have witnesses who can testify to her thievery." Mikal regarded him coolly, his eyes like chips of flint. He had listened to Qasim's whispers, had seen the growing unease amongst his elders. He was not a fool, and he knew Qasim was a man who dealt in shadows. He suspected there was more to this story than met the eye. "Is that so?" Mikal asked, his voice neutral. "Indeed, my lord," Qasim continued, emboldened by Mikal's apparent hesitation. "She is a dangerous woman, a known criminal. She will bring nothing but trouble to your tribe. Return the children to me, and I will forget this unfortunate incident ever occurred." Mikal said nothing, his silence heavy with unspoken suspicion. He looked at Qasim, his gaze piercing. He saw the greed in his eyes, the subtle flicker of triumph that he quickly masked. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this man was not to be trusted. Qasim, mistaking Mikal's silence for agreement, pressed his advantage. "My lord, I am a man of influence, a respected merchant. My displeasure could have unfortunate consequences for your tribe. It would be wise to consider my offer." Mikal's jaw tightened. He despised threats, especially threats veiled in such thinly disguised politeness. He rose from his dais, his tall figure towering over Qasim. "You will leave my camp now," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And you will not return. The children are under my protection, and I will decide their fate. Do I make myself clear?" Qasim, his face pale, bowed low and backed out of the tent, his eyes burning with resentment. He had underestimated the Sheikh, had misjudged his resolve, but Qasim was not a man to give up easily. He had planted the seeds of doubt, and he knew they would eventually bear fruit. He would wait, patiently, for the right moment to strike. Again. The elders gathered outside Mikal's tent, their faces grim. Qasim's words had taken root, their whispers now a chorus of doubt and fear. They believed Qadira was a threat, a dark cloud hanging over their tribe. They pressed Mikal, urging him to return the twins to Qasim, to appease the wealthy merchant and avert the supposed curse of orphans. "My lord," the eldest elder pleaded, his voice trembling with age, "we cannot afford to anger Qasim. He is a powerful man, with connections to other tribes. His displeasure could bring ruin upon us." Mikal listened, his face impassive. He understood their fears, their desire for peace and prosperity. He also felt a growing unease, a nagging doubt that he couldn't ignore. He had seen the genuine love in Qadira's eyes, the fierce protectiveness she held for the twins. Could she truly be the deceitful woman Qasim claimed her to be? He looked towards his tent, where Qadira sat with the children, their laughter echoing softly in the evening air. He had given her a gift, a beautiful robe, a symbol of his trust. He had witnessed her vulnerability, the quiet sorrow in her eyes as she sang the lullaby of her homeland. Could he betray that trust, condemn her based on the words of a man he instinctively distrusted? He was torn. His duty was to his tribe, to protect them from harm. But what if the true harm came from within, from the fear and prejudice that blinded them to the truth? He paced back and forth, his mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. He needed proof, something concrete to confirm or deny Qasim's accusations. He needed to know with absolute certainty whether Qadira was a protector or a threat. The fate of the twins, and perhaps even the future of his tribe, rested on his decision. Mikhail summoned Qadira to his tent. The twins, sensing her apprehension, clung to her skirts. She entered the tent, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the whispers that swirled around her, the accusations that Qasim had so skillfully planted. She saw the doubt in Mikhail's eyes, the flicker of suspicion that had replaced the warmth she had seen before. "Qasim claims you stole the twins," Mikhail said, his voice devoid of emotion. "He says they belong to him." Qadira's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to deny it, to tell him the truth about Qasim and his wicked trade. But fear held her back. She had learned the hard way that her word, the word of an obese slave, held little weight against the word of a wealthy merchant. "It is not true," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They are my sister's children. I would never steal them." Mikhail studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. He saw only fear, a raw, desperate fear that mirrored his own. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust the instinct that had told him she was a protector, not a thief. But the elder's warnings, Qasim's insistent accusations, they echoed in his mind, creating a dissonance he couldn't resolve. "Qasim says he has witnesses," Mikhail continued, his voice hardening. "He says he saw you take the children from his stall." Qadira's eyes widened in disbelief. Qasim's lies were so blatant, so easily disproven, yet they held the power to destroy her. She wanted to scream, to rage against the injustice of it all. But she knew it would be futile. She was trapped, caught in a web of deceit, her voice lost in the chorus of whispers. "He lies," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She wanted to tell Mikhail everything, to reveal the truth about Qasim's trafficking operation, about the ledger hidden beneath her robes, the proof of his crimes. But fear paralyzed her. What if Mikhail didn't believe her? What if he sided with Qasim? She couldn't risk it, not when the twins' safety was at stake. Mikhail saw the fear in her eyes, the desperation that clawed at her soul. He saw the unspoken words, the truth that she dared not speak. He felt a surge of frustration, a deep anger at the situation, at his own inability to discern the truth. He wanted to believe her, but he needed more than her word. He needed proof. "Prove it," he said, his voice harsh, the words a test of faith he didn't fully understand. Qadira flinched, her heart sinking. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and despair. She had nothing to offer, no proof to counter Qasim's lies. She was alone, adrift in a sea of doubt, with only her faith and the love for the twins to sustain her. Qadira returned to the tent she shared with the twins, her heart heavy with despair. Mikhail's words, his demand for proof, echoed in her mind. She had none. She was trapped, caught in a web of lies, with no way to escape. She looked at the twins, their innocent faces peaceful in sleep, and a fierce determination hardened her resolve. She would not let Qasim take them. She would find a way, even if it meant risking everything. Later that night, as the camp settled into an uneasy silence, Qadira slipped out of the tent. She moved through the shadows, her large frame surprisingly silent, her heart pounding in her chest. She sought out Zara, a servant in Mikhail's household, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle touch. Qadira had seen Zara's compassion, the way she treated the children in the camp with warmth and respect. She hoped, prayed, that Zara would listen, that she would believe her. She found Zara tending to the dying embers of a cooking fire, her face illuminated by the flickering flames. Qadira approached hesitantly, her voice a mere whisper. "Zara," she said, "can I speak with you?" Zara looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. She had heard the whispers about Qadira, the accusations of thievery, the supposed curse she carried, but she had also seen the love in Qadira's eyes, the fierce protectiveness she held for the twins. She gestured for Qadira to sit beside her. Qadira poured out her story, her voice trembling with emotion. She told Zara about her sister, about the twins, about how she had been sold into slavery. She spoke of Qasim, his cruel smile, his wicked trade in children. She told her about the ledger, the proof of his crimes, hidden beneath her robes. Zara listened intently, her face etched with concern. She had heard whispers of Qasim's activities, rumors of children disappearing from the marketplace, never to be seen again. She had dismissed them as idle gossip, but now, listening to Qadira's story, she realized the terrible truth. "I must tell the Sheikh," Zara said, her voice filled with urgency. Qadira shook her head, fear gripping her heart. "No," she whispered. "He will not believe me. Qasim is a powerful man. He will deny everything. I will be punished. And the twins, they will be taken away." Zara thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We need proof," she said. "Something to convince the Sheikh of Qasim's guilt." Qadira reached beneath her robes and pulled out the ledger, a small leather-bound book filled with Qasim's meticulous records. She handed it to Zara, her hand trembling. "This is his ledger," she whispered. "It contains the names of the children he has stolen, the prices he has paid, the names of the buyers. It is the proof we need." Zara took the ledger, her eyes scanning the pages filled with chilling details. She looked at Qadira, her face filled with a mixture of horror and determination. "We will expose him," she said, her voice firm. "We will save the children." They huddled together, whispering in the darkness, two women united by a shared purpose, their voices a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. They devised a plan, a dangerous plan, but one they believed was their only chance. They would gather witnesses, other slaves who had seen Qasim's cruelty, who had heard his whispered boasts. They would present their evidence to Mikhail together, and pray that he would finally see the truth. Mikhail couldn't shake the image of Qadira's fear-stricken face. Her denials had been vehement, but her trembling voice and haunted eyes had sown seeds of doubt. He couldn't reconcile the image of the fierce protector with the accusations of a child thief. Qasim's confident demeanor and the elder's anxieties gnawed at him. Sleep offered no respite, his dreams filled with the twins' vulnerable faces, and Qadira's desperate pleas. He rose before dawn, the desert air cold against his skin. He couldn't rely solely on Qasim's word, nor could he dismiss the elder's concerns. He needed to investigate, to uncover the truth for himself. He began by questioning the guards who had witnessed the confrontation in the marketplace. Their accounts were muddled, their memories conveniently hazy. Some claimed to have seen Qadira leading the children away from Qasim's stall, while others insisted they had seen nothing. Their conflicting stories only deepened Mikhail's suspicion. He then sought out the merchants who had stalls near Qasim's. Most were reluctant. to speak their fear of Qasim palpable. But one elderly rug merchant, his face etched with weariness, agreed to talk. He told Mikhail that Qasim had a reputation for shady dealings, for acquiring goods through questionable means. He had heard rumors of children disappearing from the marketplace, whispers of Qasim's involvement in the slave trade. He couldn't offer concrete proof, but his words resonated with Mikhail's growing unease. Mikhail returned to his tent, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting information. He looked at the beautiful robe he had gifted Qadira, a symbol of the trust he had felt, a trust that now felt fragile and uncertain. He thought of the twins, their innocent laughter echoing in the camp, their dependence on Qadira absolute. He couldn't condemn her without proof, but he couldn't ignore the growing evidence against her. He felt a surge of frustration, a deep anger at his own inability to discern the truth. He paced back and forth, the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. He needed to act, to find a resolution, but every path seemed fraught with danger. He was caught in a labyrinth of doubt, his loyalties divided, his heart torn between. His duty to his tribe and the growing belief that Qadira was innocent. Qadira knew time was running out. Mikhail's doubt was a palpable presence, a shadow hanging over their fragile sanctuary. Zara, her face grim, returned from her clandestine meetings with other slaves in the camp. She carried with her a collection of whispered stories, fragments of information that, when pieced together, painted a damning picture of Qasim's activities. One slave had seen Qasim paying a group of men for a young boy, his eyes wide with terror. Another had overheard him boasting about the high prices he could fetch for healthy children in distant lands. A third had witnessed him threatening a family who refused to sell their daughter, his words laced with menace. These fragmented accounts, though individually weak, formed a powerful indictment when combined. Meanwhile, Mikhail's own investigation was yielding similar results. He had discovered that Qasim had been trading with enemy tribes, a betrayal that could jeopardize the safety of his people. He found discrepancies in Qasim's accounts, evidence of hidden transactions and unexplained wealth. The rug merchant's words, once dismissed as mere rumor, now resonated with a chilling truth. Mikhail and Qadira, working independently, were unknowingly weaving together the threads of Qasim's web of deceit. Each piece of evidence, each whispered testimony, brought them closer to the truth, closer to exposing the serpent in their midst. The danger was escalating, the stakes higher than ever, but their determination remained unwavering. They were driven by a shared purpose, a fierce desire to protect the innocent, to bring justice to the light. Zara and Qadira met under the cloak of a starlit night, the desert wind whispering secrets around them. Zara had gathered a small group of slaves, their faces etched with fear and determination. Each one had a story to tell, a fragment of Qasim's cruelty they had witnessed. A young woman spoke of her brother, snatched from the marketplace and never seen again. An elderly man recounted how Qasim had cheated him out of his meager earnings, leaving him destitute. A mother wept as she described how Qasim had tried to buy her child, his eyes gleaming with avarice. Their testimonies, whispered in the darkness, formed a chorus of accusation, a testament to Qasim's depravity. Zara carefully documented their stories, etching their words onto scraps of parchment, preserving their fragile truths. Qadira listened, her heart aching for their pain, her resolve hardening with each whispered account. Unseen, Mikhail watched from the shadows. He had followed Zara, his suspicions aroused by her clandestine meetings. He had overheard the slaves' testimonies, their words chilling him to the bone. He finally understood the extent of Qasim's wickedness, the depth of his depravity. He saw Qadira amongst the slaves, her large frame a comforting presence, her voice soft as she offered words of solace. He saw not a thief, but a protector, a woman who had risked everything to defend the innocent. He realized he had misjudged her, had allowed doubt and prejudice to cloud his judgment. He felt a surge of shame, a deep regret for the pain he had caused her. He knew he had to act, to expose Qasim and bring him to justice. He watched as Zara and Qadira huddled together, their voices hushed, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of a distant fire. He saw the determination in their eyes, the unwavering courage that bound them together. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that they were not just witnesses, but allies in a dangerous fight. He would join their alliance, stand beside them, and together they would bring Qasim's reign of terror to an end. The annual tribal gathering was a vibrant spectacle of music, dance, and celebration. Tents adorned with colorful banners lined the vast expanse of desert, the air filled with the aroma of roasted meats and sweet dates. The tribespeople, dressed in their finest robes, mingled and laughed, their faces alight with joy. But beneath the surface of celebration, a storm was brewing. Mikhail stood on a raised platform, his gaze sweeping over the assembled crowd. He saw the elders, their faces etched with anticipation, the tribespeople, their eyes bright with excitement. He also saw Qasim standing near the edge of the crowd, his face a mask of smug satisfaction. Mikhail knew this was his moment, the time to unveil the truth and expose the serpent in their midst. He signaled for silence, his voice ringing with authority. The music stopped, the laughter subsided, and a hush fell over the crowd. "My people," he began, his voice resonating with power. "We have gathered here today to celebrate our heritage, our unity, our strength. But a darkness has crept into our midst, a shadow that threatens to undermine all that we hold dear." He paused, his gaze settling on Qasim. "Merchant Qasim," he said, his voice hardening, "you stand before us a respected trader, a man of influence, but beneath that veneer of respectability lies a heart of darkness." Qasim's smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. He tried to speak, to protest, but Mikhail silenced him with a raised hand. "You have traded with our enemies," Mikhail continued, his voice rising with anger. "You have betrayed our trust, jeopardized our safety. But your most heinous crime, the one that truly reveals the depths of your depravity, is your trade in children." A gasp rippled through the crowd, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Qasim's face paled, his eyes darting nervously around the assembled tribespeople. At that moment, Qadira stepped forward, her large frame commanding attention. She wore the beautiful blue robe Mikhail had gifted her, a symbol of the trust he had now restored. The twins clung to her skirts, their eyes wide with apprehension. "He lies," Qasim stammered, his voice trembling. "She is the thief. She stole the children from me." Qadira looked at Mikhail, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. She then turned to the crowd, her voice clear and strong. "These children," she said, gesturing to the twins, "are my niece and nephew. My sister, their mother, died, and I cared for them until I was sold into slavery because of my size. Qasim bought them, intending to sell them into servitude." She reached beneath her robes and pulled out the ledger, the small leather-bound book that held the proof of Qasim's crimes. She held it aloft, her voice ringing with conviction. "This is his ledger," she declared. "It contains the names of all the children he has stolen, the prices he has paid, the names of the buyers. It is the proof of his wickedness, the testament to his greed." The crowd erupted in a cacophony of shouts and murmurs. The elders, their faces etched with shame, looked at Qasim with disgust. The tribespeople, their eyes filled with anger, surged forward, their voices rising in a chorus of condemnation. Qasim, his face ashen, made a desperate attempt to flee, but Mikhail's guards moved swiftly, seizing him before he could escape. He struggled, his eyes filled with hatred, but his efforts were futile. He was trapped, his web of deceit unraveled, his crimes exposed for all to see. The ledger lay open on the table in Mikhail's tent, its pages filled with Qasim's meticulous records of his vile trade. Names of children barely more than infants were listed alongside prices, destinations, and the names of buyers who craved young slaves. Mikhail's hand clenched into a fist, his knuckles white. He had suspected Qasim's involvement in the slave trade, but the sheer scale of his operation, the callous disregard for human life, filled him with a rage he had not felt since the day his own family was stolen. Qasim stood before him, his hands bound, his face a mask of fear. The bravado he had displayed earlier had vanished, replaced by a desperate plea for mercy. "My lord," he stammered, his voice trembling, "I can explain. It was a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. I beg you, have mercy." Mikhail looked at him, his eyes blazing with fury. "Mercy!" he roared, his voice echoing through the tent. "You speak of mercy while you trade in the lives of innocent children. You steal them from their families, condemn them to a life of servitude, and you dare to ask for mercy?" He stepped forward, his tall figure towering over Qasim. He grabbed him by the collar, his grip like iron. "You have betrayed my trust, endangered my tribe, and profited from the suffering of others. You will pay for your crimes, Qasim. You will face the full weight of my justice." Qasim whimpered, his eyes filled with terror. He knew his pleas were falling on deaf ears. He had underestimated Mikhail's fury, had misjudged the depth of his compassion. He had sown the seeds of doubt, had woven a web of deceit, but in the end, it had all come crashing down around him. He had awakened the sleeping lion, and now he would face the consequences. Mikhail brought Qasim before the assembled tribe. The air crackled with tension, the tribespeople's faces a mixture of anger and disbelief. The elders, their earlier doubts replaced by shame and outrage, stood silently, their gazes fixed on the bound merchant. Qadira stood beside Mikhail, the twins clinging to her skirts, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Mikhail held up the ledger, its pages fluttering in the desert breeze. "This," he declared, his voice ringing with authority, "is the proof of Qasim's crimes. It contains the names of the children he has stolen, the prices he has paid, the details of his wicked trade." He read aloud from the ledger, his voice filled with controlled fury. He recounted the stories of the children, their names, their ages, their stolen futures. With each name, a wave of sorrow washed over the assembled tribe. They had heard whispers of Qasim's activities, but the stark reality, laid bare in his own handwriting, was far more horrific than they could have imagined. Mikhail then turned to the group of slaves Zara had assembled. One by one they stepped forward, their voices trembling, but their words filled with courage. They recounted their own experiences, their encounters with Qasim, their witnessed acts of cruelty and deceit. Their testimonies, though individually fragmented, formed a powerful indictment, corroborating the evidence contained in the ledger. The tribespeople listened, their faces etched with horror and disgust. They had trusted Qasim, had respected his wealth and influence, but now they saw him for what he truly was, a predator, a thief, a man who preyed on the vulnerable. Mikhail addressed the elders, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You allowed yourselves to be swayed by his lies," he said. "You allowed fear and prejudice to cloud your judgment. You questioned Qadira's integrity, doubted her love for these children. You have much to atone for." The elders, their heads bowed in shame, offered their apologies to Qadira. They acknowledged their mistake, their failure to see the truth. They pledged to learn from this experience, to be more discerning, more compassionate, more just. Mikhail then pronounced Qasim's sentence. He would be stripped of his wealth, his goods confiscated and distributed amongst the families he had wronged. He would be banished from the tribe, forever exiled from their lands. He would be left to wander the desert, a pariah, a reminder of the consequences of greed and cruelty. As Qasim was led away, his face contorted in despair. A collective sigh of relief swept through the assembled tribe. Justice had been served. The children Qasim had intended to sell were freed, their families reunited, their futures restored. The shadow that had hung over the tribe had been lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and unity. The dust settled around the departing caravan carrying the disgraced Qasim. The air, once thick with tension, now felt lighter, cleaner. Mikhail stood before his tribe, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He looked at Qadira, the twins, now playing happily at her feet, their laughter echoing through the camp. He saw the strength in her eyes, the unwavering love that radiated from her heart. He had witnessed her courage, her fierce protectiveness, her unwavering devotion to the twins. He had misjudged her, had allowed doubt to cloud his vision, but now he saw her clearly for who she truly was. A woman of remarkable spirit, a woman worthy of his deepest respect and admiration. He stepped forward, his gaze meeting hers. He took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "Qadira," he said, his voice resonating with emotion, "I have seen your strength, your compassion, your unwavering love. You have shown me the true meaning of family, the power of love to overcome adversity. You have challenged my preconceptions, opened my heart, and shown me that love can blossom in the most unexpected places." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled tribe. "My people," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "I have made a decision that will change the course of our tribe's future. I have vowed never to marry again, to close my heart to the possibility of love. But Qadira has shown me the folly of such a vow. She has reminded me that love is not a weakness, but a strength, a force that can bind us together, make us stronger, more resilient, more compassionate." He turned back to Qadira, his eyes filled with a warmth she had never seen before. "Qadira," he said, his voice soft but firm, "will you be my wife? Will you share my life, my heart, my future? Will you help me build a family, a tribe, where love and compassion reign supreme?" Qadira's eyes filled with tears, tears of joy and relief. She looked at the twins, their faces beaming with happiness, and then back at Mikhail, her heart overflowing with love. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I will." A cheer erupted from the assembled tribe, their voices a chorus of celebration. The elders, their faces alight with joy, offered their blessings. The tribe's people, their hearts filled with hope, embraced the new beginning. Mikhail and Qadira were married under the vast desert sky, the stars twinkling like diamonds above them. The twins, dressed in their finest clothes, stood beside them, their faces radiant with happiness. Mikhail and Qadira adopted the twins, their family now complete. They opened their caravan to other orphans, children who had lost their families, offering them a home, a family, a future. Together, Mikhail and Qadira transformed the tribe, their love a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of acceptance and compassion. They taught their people that worth was not measured by size or blood, but by the kindness in one's heart. They built a tribe where everyone belonged, where love and family were cherished above all else. And as they sat by the fire each night, their family gathered around them, their laughter echoing through the desert. They knew they had found something far more precious than they had ever lost. A love beyond measure, a family forged in the fires of adversity, a future filled with hope and endless possibilities. Mikhail's guards dragged Qasim back to the center of the camp, his fine robes now torn and dusty. His face, once smug and confident, was etched with fear and despair. He knew his game was up, his web of lies unraveled. He looked at the assembled tribe, their faces a mixture of anger and disgust, and he knew there would be no escape from their judgment. Mikhail addressed the crowd, his voice ringing with authority. "Qasim has confessed to his crimes," he declared, holding up the ledger for all to see. "He has admitted to trading with our enemies, jeopardizing the safety of our tribe. He has confessed to his vile trade in children, stealing them from their families and selling them into servitude." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd, their anger palpable. The elders, their faces etched with shame, hung their heads. They had doubted Qadira, had listened to Qasim's lies, and now they realized the depth of their mistake. Mikhail gestured towards the children who'd been rescued from Qasim's clutches. They stood, huddled together, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. "These children," he said, his voice softening, "are the victims of Qasim's greed. They have been stolen from their homes, their families, their futures. Today, we return them to the safety and love they deserve." One by one, the children were reunited with their families. Tears of joy flowed freely as parents embraced their lost children, their relief overwhelming. The camp echoed with cries of happiness, a stark contrast to the fear and despair that had gripped them just moments before. The elders approached Qadira, their faces filled with remorse. "We were wrong to doubt you," the eldest elder said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We listened to lies, allowed prejudice to cloud our judgment. We ask for your forgiveness." Qadira looked at them, her heart filled with compassion. She had known the sting of judgment, the pain of being misunderstood. She nodded, her voice soft but firm. "You have learned a valuable lesson," she said. "May it guide your actions in the future." Mikhail turned to Qasim, his gaze cold and unforgiving. "You will face the consequences of your actions," he declared. "You will be stripped of your wealth, your goods confiscated and used to compensate the families you have wronged. You will be banished from our lands, never to return." Qasim's face was ashen, his eyes filled with despair. He had lost everything, his wealth, his reputation, his freedom. He was led away, a broken man, a stark reminder of the destructive power of greed and deceit. As he disappeared into the desert, the tribe turned their attention to the future, a future now free from the shadow of his wickedness. They had faced a dark chapter in their history, but they had emerged stronger, more united, more determined to uphold the values of justice and compassion. The celebration continued late into the night. Fires burned brightly, casting flickering shadows across the desert sand. Music filled the air, drums beating a rhythmic pulse, flutes weaving, a melody of joy and relief. The tribespeople danced and sang, their hearts lightened by the restoration of justice. Mikhail watched them, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He looked at Qadira, her face radiant in the firelight, the twins nestled sleepily in her arms. He knew with a certainty that resonated deep within his soul that he had found something truly special. He approached her, his heart pounding in his chest. He knelt before her, his gaze meeting hers. "Qadira," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "I have witnessed your courage, your compassion, your unwavering love. You have shown me that true strength lies not in brute force, but in the kindness of one's heart. You have opened my eyes to a love I thought I would never experience again." He took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "Will you be my wife?" he asked, his voice clear and strong. "Will you share my life, my heart, my future? Will you help me build a family, a tribe, where love and acceptance reign supreme?" Qadira's eyes filled with tears, tears of joy and gratitude. She looked at the twins, their small faces peaceful in sleep, and then back at Mikhail, her heart overflowing with love. "Yes," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. 1,000 times yes." A cheer erupted from the assembled tribe, their voices a chorus of celebration. The elders, their faces beaming with approval, offered their blessings. The tribespeople, their hearts filled with hope, embraced the new beginning. Mikal and Kadira were married under the vast desert sky, the stars bearing witness to their union. The twins, dressed in new clothes, stood beside them, their faces radiant with happiness. Mikal and Kadira formally adopted the twins, their family now complete. They opened their caravan, their hearts, and their home to other orphans, children who had lost their families, offering them a safe haven, a loving family, a brighter future. Kadira's kindness and Mikal's strength created a ripple effect throughout the tribe, transforming their understanding of family and worth. They learned that love was not defined by blood or size, but by the compassion and acceptance they offered to one another. As the years passed, their family grew, their caravan a vibrant tapestry of laughter, love, and shared stories. Under the starlit desert sky, surrounded by the children who called them mother and father, Mikal and Kadira found a happiness they had never thought possible. They had built a family, not out of obligation or tradition, but out of love. A love that transcended all boundaries, a love that shone brighter than any star in the desert sky.